Hello everybody, my name is Skittlebomber and today I want to give all of you 3 Star Citizen tips and tricks. These will make your Star Citizen experiences a little easier and hopefully a little less frustrating. With that said, let's dive right in. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about, and the reason that I made this video, is I want to discuss inventory and specifically how I interact with it and how I equip it, to be more specifically. So, I'm wearing an undersuit right now, and you can see that it's glowing blue. What that means is that Star Citizen acknowledges that I am wearing this undersuit. Now, if I put on something else, you see how there was that very brief moment where the chest piece was not glowing blue, and it was like a grayish or lighter blue color? That means that while it was physically displaying on my character, it technically wasn't equipped. Now, this server unfortunately is working very well. This is terrible news for me. Okay, there we go. That's better. So that one took a little bit longer. So you see how Star Citizen kind of took a second for it to get the chest piece on there? So that's the moment that I'm talking about. In that moment, had I put it on my backpack here, that would have been the absolute worst thing I could have done. So then, if you get into the situation where the chest piece is still in that gray state where it's not technically equipped, and then I put on the backpack, and then I put on the guns for the backpack, and then I start putting on my legs and my arms, and then the legs aren't on, and I start putting on all these med pens or pistols or multi-tools, what I can inadvertently do is cause a pile-up on Star Citizen's back end, where Star Citizen is just going to throw its hands up and say,
Oh, fuck it.
Oh, fuck it. Yes, that's your answer. That's your answer to everything.
So if that does happen to you, then unfortunately the only thing you can do in that instance is nothing. You just have to wait for Star Citizen to kind of figure it out. Which is why it's important to only do one inventory move at a time. So for instance, you put on the chest piece, you wait for it to glow blue, and then you can put on the backpack, etc. So again, if you do see your armor glowing blue, that's one way that you can know that it is indeed equipped and that you and Star Citizen are on the same page. But if you'd rather be absolutely sure, the other way that you can do that is to open up the command prompt here and type in display info. I use display info 3, but you can use 1 or 2 as well. And then that'll show up in the top right there. You'll see all that new information. If you hit I to open up your inventory, then you'll see this pending moves in the top left, and that's how you can know for certain whether or not Star Citizen has any kind of blocker or it's just stuck trying to equip something or anything like that. Alright, now that we have discussed how to equip your inventory, let's move on to the next topic. Okay, so we have everything equipped, we didn't cause Star Citizen to stroke out on the back end, and we're ready to go on our adventure. The next thing I want to talk about in terms of inventory is when you're actually equipping that inventory in your hands. And to do that, I'm going to use my multi-tool. Now, when I pull it out, you can see there is a very brief, microsecond where it's a blank screen, and that healing screen isn't up. So my interpretation of that blank screen that occurs before the multi-tool switches over to this healing screen is that in that brief moment, technically speaking, the multi-tool is not equipped. And it's not equipped anywhere. So I have removed it from being, let's call it stowed on my hip, but it's not technically equipped into my hands yet. Now, here, the server's working great, it's just popping over almost instantly. But if the server starts chugging a little bit, it could potentially take a second or two before that healing screen pops on. And in that second or two, similar to when we were equipping our chest piece or backpack, if I do more inputs in that brief moment, that could spell disaster. So the reason that I zero in on that kind of gray area where something is showing in your hand but it's not technically equipped is because if you've ever been playing Star Citizen and your gun or med gun or whatever will just go flying out of your hands spontaneously, I believe that that is happening because you are making a secondary inventory input when the first thing you pulled out isn't technically equipped yet. So then it does pull out that second gun. But then the first gun that you had, or the multi-tool or whatever, because Star Citizen is fully physicalized, that thing has to exist somewhere. So when you moved away from that first item, it was in a state where it wasn't stowed and it wasn't in your hand. So if it wasn't in either of those scenarios, then it probably isn't going to be stored back onto you, whether that be your backpack or your hip. So in those circumstances, Star Citizen just decides to throw your gun onto the floor, and yeah, it really sucks. Okay, so this is a very extreme example of a really bad server and what that looks like when you pull out your multi-tool. So in live, it's probably not going to be this bad. This is back when patch 4.2 just opened up to wave 1. I go to the Lazarus site and I'm just checking it out. This guy goes down, he gets murder hoboed, so I pull out my multi-tool, and you see there how it was for like 2-3 seconds. The screen was just blank. So in live, it's not going to be that bad. I just use this clip just to show you how bad it potentially could be, like absolute worst case scenario. And also, yeah, if you go to the new, whatever the new thing is in the PTU Wave 1, yeah, there's a lot of murder hobos there. But anyway, that's not important. So while we wait for CIG to keep working on and implement the new inventory system, which I am very much looking forward to, until we get that, it's important to know how the current one works and how it can fail. So the key takeaway here is not, if you do these things that I've just talked about, bad things are going to happen to you. The takeaway is that by doing these things, you are creating the environment in which bad things can happen. So just by avoiding that, you're going to save yourself a lot of frustration. And with all that said, let's move on to the next topic. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about today is fruit and why you should eat it. So, what fruit does is it gives you a status that's called hydrating. Now, what that means is if we come here to the journal, hydrating helps your body to better absorb water, allowing you to satisfy your thirst for longer. So, what does that actually mean? It means that if you eat fruit and you top yourself off, you're going to be able to go longer before you start to feel thirsty again. So, where this comes in handy is if you are in an area where you don't really want to take off your helmet to drink a cruise or what have you, just because it's a little too dangerous. So think of if you are going down into an Onyx facility, or maybe you're about to go into a contested zone. Areas like that, it's just really dangerous to want to take off your helmet to try and drink something if you are that thirsty. So before you go into those areas, just topping yourself off with fruit is always a good idea. Now this may be sad to hear, but the Mighty Double Dog is actually dehydrating, meaning you're going to be thirsty a lot faster. So if you're slamming a couple of these, washing it down with some soda, you're going to be reaching for that cruise bottle a lot faster than if you had eaten fruit. Unfortunately, you can't have this much girth without having at least one negative side effect. Alright, so that wraps up the video here. I hope you found these tips to be helpful, and I really hope that they help make this game just a little less frustrating for you. Again, my name is Skittle Bomber. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.